Shalom Aleichem. We are reviewing Likut Sicha, Chelek Chavtes, volume 29, Sicha for Hoshana Rabba. I personally found this Sicha very fascinating because it's an issue that I've often wondered about. What's the role of the Aravis that we take on Hoshana Rabba? We walk around the bima, we bang him 5 times on the floor, as opposed to the Arava that we have in the Lulav. Like, why is there another Arava involved? And why Arava? There's others. We have the Lulav, the Esrig, the Hadassim, and the Arava. Boom, the Arava is chosen that he gets his own special day. Like, what's the significance? What's the meaning? We know that nominally this commemorates the Beis HaMikdash, the temple days, that every day of the temple, they would put around the Mizbeach, around the altar, Aravos, these giant willows, to show respect and celebration. And this is a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah. It's not explicit in the Torah, but it was orally handed down to Moses, so it's a mitzvah considered on the same level of import as biblical law. However, now we don't have the temple, so we do this as a commemoration. But why? And what is the Arava about? Why was the Arava chosen? In fact, in the temple, why was the Arava chosen? Why not the Hadassim? Maybe we should line up esrigs. So what is going on, and how does this trickle down to our custom now that we honor this commemoration of the temple? That they would put their Rabbis around the altar, that on the 7th day of Sukkot, we give it a name, Hoshana Rabba, the great Hoshana, which is another name for the Arava that we use to bang on the floor on that day. But this is something that was always curious to me. Another thing which I found curious, which this Sicha helped clear up, very often in our shul, on Hoshana Rabba, people would ask the question, when we circle the bima 7 times with the lulav and the esrog, do we also take along the Hoshanas, which are those 5 willows, those 5 arabas that will soon be used to bang on the floor? Do we not? And I don't think we ever really knew. The Sicha addresses it. So let's get right into it. It's a fantastic discussion. So the Rebbe says that when we look at Sukkot, we find something very special about the 7th day of Sukkot. It's not just another day of Chol HaMoed. It's very special. Of course, we know that's the day when the signing and the sealing of the good year is finalized. The language is a gute kvittel. You might say that, there's this the sign, seal, delivered, Rosh Hoshana, Yom Kippur, and Hoshana Rabba. And, but in vis-a-vis the Aravos on that day, the Rebbe says, vis-a-vis the specialness of the 7th day of Sukkot, we find various unique observances. Number 1, the Rebbe says that in the days of the Beis HaMikdash, in temple days, they would circle the Mizbeach 7 times on that day, where every other day of Sukkot only once. Number 2, the Arava was set up in the temple around the altar on the 7th day of Sukkot, even if it happened to be Shabbos. All other days of Sukkot, you only did that ritual, that observance, if it was not Shabbos. So you see something special about the day in terms of the Arava observance. And nowadays, we certainly see the Hoshana Rabba observance standing out from the rest of Sukkot, in that now we only observe the Hoshana Arava ritual on Hoshana Rabba. As we said earlier, that nowadays we take those 5 Hoshanas, that bundle of Hoshanas, which are willows, and when do we do it? And we bang it the 5 times and what have you. It's a commemoration for the temple, but we don't do it all 7 days like it was done in the temple. We only do it on Hoshana Rabba. So Hoshana Rabba keeps standing out as like the day and the observance to be held on a different level, on a pedestal. And then finally, and this is the main focus of the Sicha, that nowadays means from the moment the temple was destroyed, the sages made it their business that Hoshana Rabba will always be observed. How so? It will never be Shabbos. And they went to lengths to do this. So before the calendar was established, this is even after the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, they still would, for a period of time, they would still dedicate the new month based on the witnesses, the sightings of the moon. They would make sure that Hoshana Rabba should not be Shabbos. So if it worked out that it will be, They would bump it up by a day, or what have you. They'd make the prior month a full month, or missing a day, what have you, in order for it not to be on Shabbos. And then when the calendar was established, that for all time that the calendar is set, it was made in a way that Hoshana Rabbah can never be on Shabbos. And this is the famous principle, Lo Adu Rosh, that Rosh Hashanah, day one of Rosh Hashanah, could never be Adu, Aleph, Dalet, Vav. 1, 4, and 6, Sunday, Wednesday, and Friday. And why not? Why did the sages establish that Rosh Hashanah could never be Sunday, Wednesday, and Friday? So according to many opinions, many commentaries, the reason why Rosh Hashanah could never be allowed to fall on Sunday, because if Rosh Hashanah is on Sunday, Shmini Atzeres will also be on Sunday, because it's always exactly 2 weeks apart. And if Shmini Atzeres is on Sunday, Hoshana Rabbah is going to be on Shabbos the day before. We don't want that. And therefore the sages established, Rosh Hashanah can never be Sunday. Parenthetically, why can't Rosh Hashanah be Wednesday? Because if Rosh Hashanah is Wednesday, Yom Kippur will be Friday, and then we'll end up with 2 days of observance, Friday and Shabbos, when you can't cook, you can't prepare food. It's going to create a hardship of 2 whole days without any food preparation. And similarly, why Rosh Hashanah cannot be on Friday, because if Rosh Hashanah is Friday, Yom Kippur will be Sunday, and you got the same problem. You got 2 days in a row, Shabbos and Sunday, Shabbos and then Yom Kippur, buttered up one next to the other, and it will be a difficulty in terms of food preparation, and therefore the sages established these rules. But coming back to Hoshana Rabbah, but the sages made a system, and they made sure that Hoshana Rabbah will never be disturbed. Really? Like, what's the big deal? And this becomes the Rebbe's question. This becomes a whole discussion of the Sicha. Why did the sages insist that Hoshana Rabbah should always be in place more than the biblical shofar and lulav? Shofar is a biblical commandment. We already said Hoshana Rabbah nowadays is merely a rabbinic injunction to commemorate temple days. And yet, whereas shofar, blowing the shofar, is a biblical mitzvah nowadays, shaking the lulav is a biblical mitzvah nowadays. And yet, when they come on Shabbos, the first day of Rosh Hashanah can be Shabbos, the first day of Sukkot can be Shabbos, and what do you know? We don't do the shofar, we don't do the lulav, even though it's biblical. Yeah, but it's Shabbos. However, when it comes to Hoshana Rabbah, which is this rabbinic injunction, a rabbinical almost custom, that we take the willows to commemorate temple days, it can never be Shabbos. Why is it so important? This is not, the Rebbe is not the first one to ask this question. This is asked by the commentaries. The Tosfos asked the question, and Tosfos gives the halachic answer, and that is, it's true. The sages always strengthened rabbinic law because they were afraid that it would be moved off to the side. That if there were years in Hoshana Rabbah would be on Shabbos, and therefore would not be observed, the entire observance would be forgotten. And the reason is because it doesn't have the extra strength of a biblical law. It's only really a custom nowadays in commemoration of temple days when it was a mitzvah. And therefore they didn't want to weaken it, and they sometimes would overcompensate and give extra strength to rabbinic laws in order to make sure they're not forgotten. The language is asu chizuk l'divrayim, that the sages strengthen their own words so that they shouldn't be lose their potency and their respect of these particular observances. So that is the halachic interpretation. Says the Rebbe, but everything in Torah is precise. And therefore, the fact that it happens, that we are so strict, the sages insisted, Hoshana Rabbah should never be revoked, if you will, by Shabbos. Yeah, we understand the technical reason that Tosfos gives, that the sages wanted to strengthen rabbinic law, but there's got to be a spiritual meaning. There's got to be a meaning in terms of content, that there's something really, really special about this day. For which reason, we will never miss it. So the Rebbe jumps into this, and the Rebbe first prefaces. Okay, we're going to come back and revisit this question at the end of the Sicha, but right now the Rebbe is prefacing a whole halachic, legal discussion in Nigla, in the revealed part of Torah. What is the stance and the status, if you will, of the custom, of the mitzvah, of the law of Hoshana Rabbah shaking the Aravas? What's the status of it as compared to the Arava in the Lulav? This is a question because we know, again, we have the Rabba and the Lulav. Suddenly Hoshana Rabba comes. We have the Rabba that we walk around, that we shake for the 5 branches. Are they the same mitzvah or not? That's going to be the discussion. That's going to be the discussion. It's really not just a discussion about nowadays. It's also nominally a discussion about temple days too, where then they did it as a real mitzvah from the Torah, that all 7 days they would put a Rabba around the altar. Is that a Rabba a continuation and really one and the same mitzvah as the Arava of the Lulav, or is it separate? And again, this is something that I often wondered about. We have 4 things: Lulav, Esrog, Hadassah, and Aravas. Wouldn't you know, we took out one, the Arava, the least sensational one, and we make it its own separate observance on day 7. Okay. You know, would be curious to know why, what's the big deal that we make it its own separate observance? But also, is that Arava connected to the Arava of the Lulav? So the Rebbe says that if we look in the Gemara, we will find a number of arguments, machlokes, disputes, regarding the law of this Arava on, let's talk nowadays on Hoshana Rabba. And based on these arguments, we're going to analyze whether, which is argument A, whether Arava is an extension of the Lulav's Arava or entirely distinct mitzvah. But let's first discuss this A for a second. Now, it's clear that we have to have 2 mitzvah observances. We have to have an Arava in the Lulav, and then we have the observance of the Arava as distinct from the Lulav. That's a clear, that's a fact. In temple days, that was an absolute Torah obligation. Nowadays, it's rabbinic. But the fact is, yeah, we do have 2 observances. The question is, do these 2 observances stem from the same thing? Are they essentially one, but there's 2 ways to observe, if you will, the same object of the mitzvah, or is it 2 separate mitzvahs? So let's give an example from the Lulav. You know, there's the mitzvah to make a bracha on the Lulav every morning of Sukkot, and then there's another law that when it comes to Hallel, you have to shake the Lulav in different directions. It's a different law, but it's clearly the same mitzvah, the same Lulav. The Lulav is given to you to do observance A, make the bracha in the morning, and observance B, move it in all directions during Hallel. Nobody's going to say that this is a whole different concept of Lulav. It's one and the same. It's just a different application, a different usage of the same mitzvah object of Lulav. How would you say the case is with the Rabba of Hoshana Rabba? Is it, you know, that the Torah says you should take Aravos on Sukkot? It's one of the 4 kinds. But the Rabba has another usage. Aha! It's part of the Lulav, and it's also used on Hoshana Rabba. Or no? It has nothing to do with the Arava of the Lulav. That's Arava of the Lulav, and this is a whole different thing. It's a whole different mitzvah. It's a whole different object. It's not connected. Which one is it? What would be the difference? So you might say the difference might be, I'm thinking practical for us, the question that I asked earlier, which we often wondered about in our shul. When we march around the bima 7 times on Hoshana Rabba, with the Lulav and the Esrog, do we also take along that bundle of Eshinus, or do we not? Well, if that bundle of Eshinus, that mitzvah, that custom or law of Arava is linked to the Lulav, so if you're marching around with the Lulav, take it along with you. If it's independent, then don't take it along with you. The other question might be, could I use, for this mitzvah of Hoshana Rabba, of banging the Arava, could I take the Arava from my Lulav? Assume I finished saying Hallel, I did my 7 circles with the Lulav, I'm done with the Lulav. Hey, let's say I didn't get a hold of a bundle of Eshinus, could I go over to my Lulav and take out the Arabas and use them? Or not? If it's the same mitzvah, you could use them. And you might say, well, that's not going to work because that's only 2, and really you need 5 for Hoshana Rabba. But that's all details. Reality is you don't really need 5. You can use 1. Technically, halachically, you can get away with just one. So could I take it from the lulav, or must I get another set? So the Rebbe points out, in the Rebbe's desire to analyze the item A, is the arava, the mitzvah of Hoshana Rabba, an extension of the lulav's arava, or entirely distinct? The Rebbe analyzes 4 different arguments in the Gemara, which, absent the Sicha, are seen as separate arguments, and the Rebbe says, I'm going to show you that they're all connected. One argument is, can we use the lulav's arava, or must we take a separate arava for Hoshana Rabba? That's an argument that exists. Then there is another argument in the Gemara. Does the arava of Hoshana Rabba have the same requirements of the lulavs? One argument is that it does. In order for the arava and the lulav to be good, to be kosher, you're supposed to have at least 3 leafed branches. That means you have to have branches with 3 leaves on them. If it's less than 3 leaves, it's not kosher. Of course, we are meticulous to have many more, but a minimum of 3 leaves on the arava, and that makes it kosher. So you have to have 3 leafed branches in order for the arava to be kosher in the lulav. What about the arava from Hoshana Rabba? Does it need 3 or not? The other opinion is no. 1 leaf and 1 branch suffices. In the lulav, actually, you need 2 branches, right? There's 2 branches that are used, but each one has to have 3 leaves. So there's 2 opinions. Says the Rebbe, don't you see the linkage? And the Rebbe is the one who links all of these machlokes, all of these various disputes, which seem to be independent, so they're all connected. If you hold that the lulav's arava can be used, that means you hold it's an extension of the lulav's arava. If you hold you have to take a separate arava, it's not an extension. It's a whole separate mitzvah. It happens to have the same type of vegetation that's taken, but it's a separate mitzvah. If you say it has the same required measurements, namely, just like the lulav needs a 3-leaf branch, and so does the arava here, then you hold that it says the Rebbe, that would go along with the thinking of approach 1. It's an extension of the lulav's arava. But if you say, which is actually the halacha, that it suffices a Hoshana Rabba to have a 1 branch with 1 leaf on it, and you're good. So clearly, it is not the same definition as the harava of the lulav. Says the Rabbi further, look into the Gemara, there's a debate between Abba Shal and the sages. Where did we derive this mitzvah of arava? Again, nowadays it's rabbinic, but in temple days when they would put it around the altar, it's not in the Torah. Torah tells us to take the 4 kinds, the lulav, the esrog, hadassim, and aravas. It doesn't say anything about putting aravas around the altar. How do we know it? So one opinion is approach 1, this is Abba Shal, and he says that it's derived from a verse. It says in the verse when it speaks about aravas, arvei nachal, aravos of the brook, in plural. From here the sages derived that this hints to the fact that there's 2 aravas in plural. There's the arava of the lulav and the arava of Hoshana Rabba, or arava of the altar. Whereas the sages say no, it's not hinted and connected to that verse at all. It is halacha leMoshe miSinai. There are certain laws in the Torah, a relatively small number, which are not in the book at all. They were just handed down by Moses orally to us. These have the weight of a biblical law. They're not like rabbinic injunctions or rabbinic enactments. They're given straight from Hashem to Moshe Rabbeinu, but they were given orally. Says the Rebbe, don't you see? Abba Shal, which is that he holds that you learn the arava of Hoshana Rabba from the plurality of the verse. Arvei nachal, the aravos, plural of the brook. He's linking the arava of Hoshana Rabba to the arava of Sukkah. Of course, it's a different observance. And the same thing is the arava in the temple, around the Mizbeach. It's a different observance, but they're linked. They're derived from the same verse. Because it's an extension of the same mitzvah, just another application of it. Whereas according to the sages, the Chachamim, they derive it, they say it's not derived from a verse. It is just given orally from Moshe at Sinai, because they hold it's an entirely different mitzvah, not linked to the arava of the lulav. And finally, the other application would be, should we or should we not take the aravas along with us during the seventh circle march. And we find a discussion and different opinions in halacha. Halacha comes down, as we're going to see, that the Rambam says you should not take it along with you, and the Rebbe brings down from the Arizal and the Ramah the Code of Jewish Law rules, and the Arizal makes a big deal. Don't take it with you, like as if it's a big problem if you take it with you. It should not be taken along for that parade, says the Rebbe. And again, these four different arguments, B, C, D, and E, are brought in the Talmud and in commentary. And nominally, they're seen as different arguments, unrelated. Says the Rebbe, don't you see they're all related? It's the main point of whether or not the Arava of the Lulav is one and the same with the Arava of Hoshana Rabba, or is it distinct? And that will then create approach 1 and 2 for item A on the list, whether it's an extension of the lulav or independent, will create the differences of approach 1 and 2 for B, C, D, or E. Says the Rebbe, look at the Rambam. And the Rebbe is on solid ground with his approach, that all these machlokas, all these disputes are not separate, but they're all linked. Look at the Rambam. The Rambam clearly rules on all four of them. The Rambam rules like approach 2. The Rambam says it's a law conveyed by Moses at Sinai. That's D. That in addition to the Lulav Rabba, a separate Rabba is brought. That's B. And one cannot exempt this observance with the Lulav Rabba, okay. And even one leaf and one branch is sufficient. That would be C. So we see Rambam compiles, Rambam's ruling is that the Arava is a separate observance in all of these areas. And that becomes the Rebbe's conclusion, if you will. Again, there's two opinions, but the Rebbe says that's the Rambam's conclusion, and that's the accepted halacha, that Arava is an entirely separate mitzvah from the mitzvah of the lulav and the arava therein. Says the Rebbe, let's understand the spirituality of it. Why would Torah give us a separate mitzvah of arava as distinct from the arava and the lulav? Like, what's the point? What's the message on a Hasidic level? So the Rebbe is going to get into it. So the Rebbe tells us, we all know that so this is what we're trying to accomplish now with the rest of the Sicha. We're trying to understand the Aravas of Hoshana Rabba, the fact that it's entirely independent mitzvah from lulav. What's the spiritual application? What's the message? What's the point? What's the message of Arava in the lulav as opposed to the Arava of Hoshana Rabba, that it's a whole separate mitzvah? And we've proven it on a legal level, on a halachic level. Now we're going to explain the spirituality of it, and once it's explained, we'll come back and we'll answer the Rebbe's original question is, why were the sages so emphatic? Why do they insist Hoshana Rabba should never fall out on Shabbos? And they didn't have the same insistence when it came to biblical mitzvahs such as Sofer and Lulav. What's so special about Hoshana Rabba that this custom can never be interrupted? But let's come back. So there's a medrash that we're all familiar with. The Medrash says that the Esrog and the Lulav and the Arava and the Hadassah and the Myrtle, they have different elements that represents the unity of the Jewish people, right? This is something that we're all familiar with. The Esrog has a taste and a smell. It means Jews who have Torah and mitzvahs. And the Lulav only has a taste because of the dates that are produced on the palm branch. It only has a taste and no smell. That means people who have Torah study. Torah studies like taste. You digest it. It's like ideas. But they don't have the smell, which smell represents mitzvahs. The myrtle only has a smell, means people who have mitzvahs. A person who's filled with good deeds, you might say they give off a good aroma. They smell good. They create a good environment. But they don't have taste. They don't have the concept of the digesting of the Torah, and et cetera, et cetera. And the Arava represents, it's a willow. It has no taste nor smell. And this represents a Jew who has no Torah nor mitzvahs. This is the meaning of the Medrash in the simple, straightforward meaning. Says the Rebbe, there's a Hasidic meaning. And this is based on the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Frierdiker Rebbe describes the Arava in glorious terms. He says this is the person who serves Hashem and studies Torah and everything else. He does everything. Not that he does neither. But rather it means that his motivation is pure and simple faith. The Rebbe says what the previous Rebbe is teaching us is that all of these four on the Hasidic interpretation of this Medrash, they all do everything. It's not okay to translate the lulav as a person who only studies Torah and doesn't do mitzvahs. How does that work? If you study Torah, you're automatically going to do mitzvahs. I mean, if you don't do mitzvahs, then there's a problem. Why are you studying Torah? Conversely, a person who just does mitzvahs and doesn't study Torah, of course he has to study some Torah. He needs to know what to do. A Rabba Jew, you're telling me a person does no Torah, no mitzvahs, so how is that good? No. This is all of them are doing Torah and mitzvahs completely. To the best of their degree. They're studying Torah, they're doing mitzvahs. The conversation on a Hasidic level, says the Rebbe in the name of the previous Rabbi, is what is the motivation behind their Torah and mitzvahs. So the Esrik Jew represents a Jew who's motivated intellectually and emotionally. They have a tremendous understanding of Torah. And they have a love of Hashem. And that's hinted in the taste and the smell. Taste represents intellect. Smell will represent emotion, represents good deeds which are related to emotion, because emotion is what triggers action. And therefore, that's what this might be. This is what this means. The person has everything, but they're motivated by everything, intellectually and emotionally. Whereas the lulav is a Jew who studies Torah and does mitzvahs, but it's more of intellectual motivation. Maybe they understand a lot about the reasons to do the mitzvahs, and that's what motivates them. But what do? They do everything. The Myrtle Jew is the one who has maybe a love for Hashem. They have an emotional inspiration. They have less understanding of why they're doing things. But they have also Torah and mitzvahs, and the Arava Jew has Torah and mitzvahs. But their inspiration, pure simple faith. They're not looking for any inspiration. There is no motivation. They're not understanding the reasons. They're not feeling a love for Hashem. They are motivated by the pure, simple faith. Now the Arava is elevated in a way greater than all else. If you discuss the meaning of this medrash on the simple face of it, the Arava is a Jew who has neither Torah nor mitzvah, so clearly he or she is on the lowest level. However, we're including them in the bundle, and we're explaining that without them, we don't have all the four kinds, and the mitzvah is not complete, and it shows the unity, and that meaning holds. That meaning still exists on a plain level. But on the Hasidic level, all of them are doing all Torah and mitzvahs. The question is only the motivation. So now the Arava, in a sense, who represents the Jew who just serves Hashem with perfect faith, in a sense, this person is the greatest. Because here you see the Emunah Pshuta, the pure faith, the pure dedication to Hashem. There's something special. There's an edge to that. You see this all? Says the Rebbe. Says the Rebbe, this edge of the Arava is hinted in the special unity that the Arava represents. It's known from Chassidus, is brought already back from the Alter Rebbe, that the four kinds of the lulav, the four species that are used in the lulav, they all represent unity. Not only does all four of them represent unity, as per this medrash itself, but each one of these has an element of unity in it. And why is unity so important? Because unity represents the presence of Hashem. Hashem Echad. Everything besides Hashem represents diversity and division and difference. There's a world, there's all kinds of things, and millions of people, etc., etc. Hashem represents oneness. So the natural state of reality is that things should be divided and disparate and different. When we see something in the world that it represents a unity, that represents that it's closely linked to its source, to Hashem. You might say, in nature, it's survival of the fittest. So every vegetation, we're talking about vegetations, every vegetation would hold its own. It would worry about its own. And here we see 4 particular vegetations that they represent the unity, the concept of unity and oneness, of diversity in one. And therefore they, in a sense, are the right vehicle to represent Hashem's presence, which is what Sukkot is all about. Where do you see the unity in each? So the Rabbi brings from Chassidus that in the esrog, we see it in the fact that it grows from all seasons. It's the only fruit. Most fruits will grow from 1 season, 2 seasons. Here, all 4 seasons, it's on the tree, and it doesn't get ruined from the winter seasons, the other seasons. In fact, it's enhanced from each season. That represents a power of unity. Takes all the seasons, which is a good example of diversity in time, if you will, and says, heck, they're all going to complement me because I'm connected to a concept of oneness, which creates all the seasons. And therefore, they're not in conflict to me, if one season or another. To the contrary, they all work together. The lulav represents unity because all its leaves are bound together, which is quite unusual how the lulav has all these leaves, and they're all bound up, and they stay together. That's what makes it kosher. And it represents a unity. Whereas normally, leaves just part, which eventually would happen to the lulav if you leave it long enough. Everything parts. Again, survival of the fittest. Human nature. Every part of creation looks for its own space. And here all these leaves stay combined. So in a sense, this is a keli, this is a vehicle to represent Hashem's oneness. When you talk about the hadassim, they also represent the unity of Hashem. The language is tlasa b'chad kina, that the hadas, the myrtle, grows with 3 leaves coming out of one point. Typically, you look at most branches, there's a branch, and then there's a leaf coming here, and a leaf coming here, a leaf coming here. But all the leaves, 3 of them, and consistently 3, 3, 3, and 3, coming out of one particular point, that is unique, it seems, to the myrtle, to the hadas, which shows its unity. And then in the arava, we have the unity. The language of the Talmud is gedelim b'yachvana, they grow brotherly. If you ever look at an arava tree or a arava bush, they're on top of each other. They're literally on top of each other. It's hard to take them apart. And this is actually hinted in the way the Torah refers to them. Arvei nachal, which means willows of a brook. We know they don't have to be actually from a brook, but they have to be of the kind that grow by a brook. But the Torah uses the word arvei nachal because it represents, it hints, the word nachal will hint to the word achvana, to brotherly, to brotherhood. And that shows their unity. It says the Rebbe, analyze these 4 unities, and you'll see that the unity of their Rabba stands alone. It's a quantum leap removed from the other unities, because all the other 3 unities, while they represent unity, but they represent unity that's self-contained within themselves. The esrog says, look at me, I manage all 4 seasons. But not that I'm connected to another esrog or to another thing, no. I manage all 4 seasons. Look at the lulav, look at me, all my leaves are together. But nothing to do with you, just mine. The myrtle, the 3 on the one stem, but again, it's all contained within that myrtle. When it comes to the arava, we see the concept of unity, which again, unity represents Hashem's presence, because he's the only thing that's really, truly united. And we see Hashem's presence spelled out in the strongest way. It's not just united with itself, it's united with all its brothers. It's the opposite of the nature of every existence, that it fights for its space and the survival of the fittest. No, it's let's get together. They're all sitting together by a chsiddush of Habringen. They're all brotherly on top of each other. And this represents that and the Rebbe says further that Arava is the only one where the unity is spelled out in the name. As we said, the Arvei Nachal, the river, the brook, the willows of the brook, which is hinting to the fact, Arvei Nachal, Gedelim Ba'achvana, Nachal and Achvana, representing brotherhood, that in the name itself is spelled out the brotherhood, and the brotherhood is beyond itself. It's not just that it's united within itself, as the other 3, but it's united with others. And therefore we see the Arava, again, according to the Hasidic meaning, it's not on the bottom of the totem pole, but in a sense, qualitatively, it's greater than all. If you find a Yid, and maybe it's a simple Yid who didn't have an opportunity or the capacity to be inspired to Torah mitzvahs through intellectual or emotional appreciation and inspiration. However, he or she is motivated by emunah pshuta, by simple, pure faith, As explained, the Rebbe brings in Hayom Yom from the Baal Shem Tov, that the pure, simple faith of a simple Jew mirrors the simplicity of Hashem's pure essence. In a sense, it's linked to the highest levels, to the level of Hashem's essence, which has no details. It's pure and simple. Look at this Jew. His love for Hashem is pure and simple. He just has faith. He doesn't need to have a lot of information or a lot of emotional or intellectual motivation. What do you mean? Hashem wants, he does it. There's something extraordinary about it. The Rebbe gives the example might be, you love your child. You love your child, no because, right? Ultimately, we don't love our children because. We love our children because they're our essence. There is no reason. You don't love your child because they're smart, because they're creative. This is all secondary. However, the reality is that human nature is that there's a certain love that we have for a baby, a young child, in a sense more so than an adult child or a grown-up child. What's the explanation? The grown-up child also is loved. He's also your child. You also love him with the full essence. However, because that child now has other virtues, that child has understanding and has talent, etc., etc., and now you admire those as well, in a sense, it eclipses the essential love. The essential love is there, but it's distracted from. Whereas in the little baby, there are no other virtues. And all you see, this is my kid. I love him because he's mine. The essential love shines without any distractions. And therefore, in a sense, it comes out to be stronger. Says the Rebbe, the same concept is here. The Rebbe doesn't give the example of the love of a child, but it's hinted close enough. But the Rebbe does say that all of these people are motivated and they're all serving Hashem. The three higher level people, of course, they also have faith. They're a Yid. Every Yid has natural faith. Emunah pshuta, a simple, pure faith. However, because they also have other virtues, in a sense, it distracts from that pure, simple faith. Whereas in the simple Jew, you see a simple Jew doing a mitzvah with simple faith. Aha! The neshama shines. The neshama shines. We call it here in Chabad of Port Washington, the Jew in the raw. There's something extraordinary about it when you see a Yid do a mitzvah. He or she has no idea why they're doing it. And they almost don't need to know. And they just do it. And there's such a geschmack that they're doing what Hashem said with pure faith. In a sense, this is the greatest thing because it's not distracted by anything. And the pure faith shines through. So here the Rebbe discussed the meaning of the Rabba from the Hasidic perspective. The pure faith. Says the Rebbe, now let's analyze. Remember what we're trying to do in the Sicha. We're not just trying to explain the value of the Rabba. We're trying to explain that there's two types of Rabba. There's a Rabba in the Lulav, and there's a Rabba of Hoshana Rabba. And they're not the same, as we discussed earlier, from the halachic perspective, right? Approach 1 and 2. I have it again here on the bottom of the screen. And we said that the Rambam, etc., we go by approach 2, that it's a distinct mitzvah. It's an entirely distinct thing. There's the Rabba of the Lulav, which is wonderful. The Rabba of Hoshana Rabba, forget about it. It's a whole different ballgame. Why? So first the Rebbe explains what is the Rabba in general, as we just said. It's the Emunah Pshuta. It's something so pure and simple. The simple faith. Says the Rebbe. Now we're going to analyze that the Rabba Hoshana Rabba is on a whole different level. Simply put, you could say like this, that the whole Sukkos, Hasidus tells you, the Arava, that simple, pure Jew, also gets into the bundle. Whereas on Hoshana Rabbah, that simple, pure Jew is celebrated as the greatest of all. That could be a simple way of explaining this part of the Sicha. What's so special about the Arava of Hoshana Rabbah as distinct from the Arava of the Lulav? The Arava and the Lulav is just one of 4. And the others have tremendous virtue. However, we point out the Rabba is also virtuous. And without him, you can't make the mitzvah. Even though he's the lowest level Jew, he doesn't have a lot of inspiration. Nevertheless, he comes into the bundle and he perfects the bundle and he brings to the table the concept of the simple faith. But on Hoshana Rabbah, we take him out and he stands alone and we celebrate that Jew with that simple, pure faith as the greatest of the great. So that is perhaps what the Rebbe is saying, that Hoshana Rabbah is special and distinct because it stands alone. my wife was taking around the lulav yesterday, and she meets a Jew in the park and offers him to shake the lulav, ask him if he's Jewish. His initial reaction is, I'm not really Jewish. She looks at him, she says, you look Jewish. Turns out that his great-grandmother was Jewish, all the way up the mother's line. So he was a Yid. So she starts explaining to him that you don't understand, this is your mitzvah, and how the mitzvah represents that even the Arava Jew, who may not have any appreciation, is part of the mitzvah. And he was very taken, and he asked to shake the lulav, and he even wanted to know, show me which part represents me. Show me, as she pointed out, the Arava, that's the part that represents him, and there's such a beauty to this. But again, on Hoshana Rabba, we don't just have him as part of the bundle, but we actually emphasize him as separate and apart, as even greater. As even greater. To analyze this, and to me, this is the deepest part of the Sicha. I think this is the essence of what the Rebbe is trying to say here. To analyze the Arava of the Lulav versus the Arava on its own of Hoshana Rabba. That the Arava of the Lulav is a simple, pure faith. And the Arava of Hoshana Rabba is a simple, pure faith. However, in the Lulav, that faith is reflected upon the intellectual and the emotional inspiration, whereas in Hoshana Rabba it stands alone. So let me just analyze. I want to share a thought that I learned from Rabbi Yoel, explaining something that I think is what the Rebbe is saying here. There's a known Hasidic concept that there's something special about the third of the 7 midos of Hashem, Tiferes, which means beauty. And the language is Tiferes Ole Ad HaKeser. Tiferes, it connects directly to the crown, to Keser. Why would Tiferes connect to Keser? Keser represents the crown. It's above all the Sephiros. Suddenly we pick out one and we say Tiferes is connected to the Keser. What's the linkage? The Keser is the crown of Hashem. It's God's infinite desire. It's infinity. Whereas the Spheros, the Midos of Hashem, their name represents, they're limited. There's kindness, there's discipline, there's beauty. So Chassidus explains that if you analyze Tiferes, you see how it's connected to the Keser. Why? Tiferes means beauty. What is beauty? Because it's a combination of colors. One color, as nice as it is not considered beautiful. You can see a nice color, but to call it beauty, you need a combination of colors. And when the colors combine, this is nice. And this is what Tiferes is, the third of the Sephiros. You have Chesed and Gevura, kindness and discipline. They're opposite colors. And then Tiferes is a combination of both, and therefore it's considered beautiful. That's what the word Tiferes means. So the question is asked, how do you create beauty from 2 colors? I mean, which color brings the beauty to the table? If color A is not beautiful and color B is not beautiful, 0 plus 0 equals 0. This is not beautiful, this is not beautiful. How suddenly you put it together, you get beauty? Where did it come from? So Chassidus explains that really beauty comes from the merging. There is no beauty in one color or in another color. The beauty is when the 2 colors merge, the merging, the synthesis, that's the beauty. And Chassidus says, why is that beautiful? Because real beauty is something that's pure and simple, infinity. Real beauty is infinity, that which is beyond. Right? That's what Hashem is, total infinity. It's total simplicity, pshitos, that's the word. It's beyond any definition, beyond any description. It just represents infinity. That's beautiful. When you start telling me what Chassidus would call tziyur, definition, it could be wonderful, but it's not beautiful. What makes it beautiful? Tziyur means limitation. This looks like this looks like that. It's nice, but what makes it beautiful? Beautiful is a complement. Beauty means it's beyond this definition or that definition. It graduates it. It's something greater. It links to the infinity of Hashem. Says Chassidus, that's the beauty in Tiferes, because you took 2 colors and they're opposites. And yet, instead of maintaining their own space, they somehow merge and create a third beauty or what have you. That merging is where the beauty comes in. So you're right. It's not coming from A nor B. because 0 and 0 equals 0. It's coming from a third element. It's coming from the merging, the fact that they leave space for the other, the fact that they allow for like a bittul, for putting themselves aside and recognizing a greater truth. And so really the beauty is not in either color, but in the merging of the colors. And therefore, Rabbi Yael explains it beautifully. He says, look at anything in the world, and you call it beautiful. Take a piece of furniture, take a watch, take anything. The beauty is, let's take a piece of furniture. This is a gorgeous desk. The beauty is when you don't see the parts, but you see the sum of its parts. If you look at a desk and you see all the pieces of wood and all the nails, you're not going to say it's beautiful. When you look at a desk and you don't see wood, and you don't see nails, and you don't see drawers, you just see a beautiful desk, that becomes beautiful. Because beauty, again, is in that which graduates the details and unites them. That's something special. You might say within a person. From the Hasidic perspective, what's a beautiful person? Not a person with this nice feature or that nice feature, but rather than seeing the details of the features, you're seeing a person, you're seeing an neshama, you're seeing someone that's greater than all of those that brings them all together. So coming back to Tiferes, that you take two opposite Sephiros and they merge together, the beauty is in the merging aspect. And therefore we say Tiferes Oila Ada Keser. Tiferes is a reflection of the Keser. The Keser is Hashem's infinity. It's a level of Hashem's will. It has no definition or form, no tziyur. It's simplicity, it's infinity. That's beautiful, obviously. You want to find beauty within the spheres, within the realm of reality of our world, which our world cannot exist without definition. Keser is beautiful, but beyond definition. It can't exist in our world. It's Hashem's world. However, within the realm of spheres and within the realm of our world, within the realm of definition, you want to find beauty. You're only going to find it by the merging of the various definitions, and when they merge together, they spell out that there's something greater than definition, and that's where the beauty is. And therefore, Tiferes is an extension of Keser or an expression of Keser. So the question is, if that's the case, it should be equal to Keser. And the answer is it's not quite. You see, Keser represents the actual purity of Hashem's existence. It's Hashem's will. It has no definition. It's just Him. However, within the realm of definition, there's no way within the realm of definition of the ilamis, of the spheres, of the worlds, etc., and certainly in our worlds, to find beauty without definition, because everything has to have definition. Only God has no definition. Only God's infinity has no definition. So while on the level of Keser, which is God's infinity, there's no definition, the way that truth and that beauty and that pshittas, that simple infinity is expressed in the existences other than Hashem, which all have definition, you know how it's expressed when definitions merge together. And therefore you get a taste of that which is beyond definition. But you can only get it through the merging of definitions, because you can't tell me beauty if you don't have anything to look at. You can't tell me what's beautiful. There's nothing there. You can't talk to me that language. I don't know what nothing means. For that, you have to go to the Keser of Hashem. And therefore, if we analyze it, we see that, Keser is, Tiferes is a wonderful thing, but you can't compare its infinity to the Keser of Hashem. Tiferes is Hashem's infinity manifest in the finite. Where the finite merge, so they express a concept of infinity, that they're bigger than themselves. Proof is they can merge. So their infinity is mirrored in the finite. Their simple purity is mirrored in various forms and colors. Whereas the Keser is the infinity all on its own. I hope that's helpful. Apply that here now. The Rabba and the Lulav represent simplicity, as we said. But its simplicity is expressed through non-simplicity. The Arava is one of four, and all the others have all kind of complicated expressions and details. This guy has Torah, this guy has mitzvahs, intellectual, emotional, and then you have the simple pure faith as mirrored against, because simple pure faith doesn't say anything. You only know its virtue by the fact that you that you deduce that it doesn't have any other virtues. So here you have shown the beauty of the simple faith, but only as it's reflected against the other virtues of intellectual and emotional. Because in our world, what does simple faith mean? How is that a virtue? It's nothing. Aha! What's a virtue? This guy has intellectual inspiration. This guy has emotional. This guy has both. Different virtues, and then you find a simple Jew who does it with the simple purity. The simple purity is now mirrored as reflected against the other virtues of the other Jews. So it's wonderful, but you didn't yet touch the neshama in a place of real pure simplicity. You're bringing out that simplicity as reflected against the other details that the neshama has, namely intellect and emotion. Whereas when it comes to Hoshana Rabba, we say, okay, I got the message. Now we're going to touch the crown of Hashem directly. We take new Arabbas, not the Arabba of the Lulav, as we said before. And we don't have all the other four kinds. And we just take the simple faith as it is. We don't take it as it's reflected by the others. We don't take it, to use our analogy, we don't see the beauty of the colors because we see that they're bigger than themselves by the merging. But rather we actually take the simplicity. There's no colors at all. It's a whole different level. We're able to see somehow the essence of infinity without any application. And therefore, our Rava on Hoshana Rabba is a whole different level. And therefore, it makes sense that the Rebbe spent a half a Sicha emphasizing, as you see in the middle of the screen, approach 1 and 2, and showing on the legal level that a Rava of the Hoshana Rabba is a separate, distinct mitzvah, and you have to take a separate Rava. And you don't use it for the circle, for the 7 circles. I'm repeating approach 2. What's the big deal? Like, why can't you use the Arabah of the Lulav for Hoshana Rabba? And why can't you take the Arabah of Hoshana Rabba and take it around with the Lulav? And the answer is, it's a whole different level. In my analogy, it's like going from Tiferes to Keser. It's a whole different kettle of fish. That the Arabah is wonderful in the Lulav. It reflects pure, simple faith as much as a person can access in their conscious self, in their mind and heart. How so? By negating mind and heart, by negating intellect and emotion, you're left with simple faith. Whereas here we're actually talking about the neshama itself, the essential bond with Hashem, and that's a whole different level. You need a whole different Arabah, and it has nothing to do with the Arabah the Lulav. You might say in plain English, the simple faith that we have by the essence of our soul is not because we're absent intellect and emotion. No, because we have simple faith, because we're one with Hashem. The Rava and the Lulav means a simple faith because it's absent intellect and emotion. And that's very nice. It's still beautiful. As we said earlier, a simple Jew, we see him do a mitzvah. Beautiful. Look how special. A diamond in the raw. The Rava on its own, of Hoshana Rabba, the simple faith of a Yid is neshama's shining. It's perfection. It's seeing the purity of the neshama, which is a reflection of the purity of Hashem's essence. Says the Rebbe, this is also further emphasized in some of the details. As we said, it's an entirely distinct mitzvah. And you have to take a separate Rabba. And you can't use you don't take it on the 7 circles, it's a different mitzvah. But also notice that the halacha is that one leaf on one branch suffices. Whenever you talk about one, you're talking about the perfect unity. The normal Rabba has step 3. The Rebbe doesn't say this, but if my example of Tiferes is correct, that could reflect in 3. But the one leaf on one branch represents, you're not uniting, you're not creating a oneness by uniting the many. You're creating a oneness because there's nothing but the oneness. You start with the one and you finish with the one. You graduate to the space of the oneness, and perhaps that's what happens. The whole sukkah is where we're trying to reach the oneness because we're putting together all kind of things. And even the oneness of Arava, which is greater than everything else, but it's still a oneness of many. When it comes to the Arava of Hoshana Rabba, there's one leaf, one branch suffice. Just give me one. Because we're touching a place within the Yid, which is one with Hashem, and there isn't a unity of many, there's just oneness. Says the Rebbe, that's also why this was taught to Moshe orally at Sinai. The Rebbe is teaching us a concept which is useful in all of Judaism. And that is, what's the thing that Hashem gave certain laws in the Torah, most of them, and some of them he just gave orally to Moshe at Sinai? Like, why didn't he do it all in the Torah? Remember, these are not rabbinic laws that have a lesser status, if you will, than Torah laws. These are Torah laws, except instead of being in the Torah, they are given orally to Moshe at Sinai. An example is the mitzvah of Rabba. Again, it was in temple days. It's not in the Torah. It was given to Moshe orally at Sinai, according to the approach that we're taking. Another example is, in the temple, they would pour wine libations on all the offerings. And it's in the Torah very clearly. Niskeyem, many, many times, it's a biblical mitzvah. But then on Sukkot, there was the mitzvah of pouring water, which we know that water is not in the Torah itself, explicit. It was handed down orally to Moshe. And that's why the Tzedukim, the Sadducees, they didn't keep it. And that's why sometimes the high priest would not pour the water, it poured on his feet. The people stoned him with their estrus, right? The famous story in the Talmud. Because it's not in the Torah. How do we know it? Orally. Says the Rebbe, this is not a lesser thing, this is even a greater thing. Why so? Torah is giving the will of Hashem. But you can't tell me will of Hashem. Will, even of a person, is pretty infinite. Will of Hashem, it's pure infinity. In the model we talked earlier, the will of Hashem comes from Keser. It's Hashem's crown. It's infinity personified. So how do I deal with that? So therefore Hashem gave us his will through Torah. Torah is Hashem's words. It's Hashem's wisdom. Torah has letters and words. This is already forms, even though there's very holy forms and they're very closely linked to his will. The fact is that Torah is Hashem's wisdom, and the letters of the Torah is Hashem's putting his will in form. So you might say that represents Hashem's infinity coming down in some form. Whereas there's certain things of the Torah that Hashem wanted to give his will in its pure sense. What did he do? He didn't write it in Torah. He can't write it down. He can't spell it out. Sometimes you have a feeling, you want to express it. There's no words that are going to express it. So you just shed a tear to bring home that message. Or if you're trying to bring home a message, you can do it sometimes by the movement of your fingers. It says that a very wise teacher who can't quite express their ideas will give it by the moving of their fingers. The language is Dailech Hakima Beramiza, that a wise person will understand the hint, because you can't quite express it. Says the Rebbe, that's the wisdom, that's the mystery of Halacha LeMoshe Misinai, laws that are given from Moshe at Sinai, that they're so united with Hashem's essence, which we know every mitzvah is part of Hashem's essence. You can't separate Hashem and his mitzvahs. Hashem is in his will is one. Hashem and his ideas are one. However, there are those ideas that Hashem found a way, if you will, to put it in the form of the letters of the Torah. But then there are those mitzvahs that are so united with him, that so represent his essential being, his essential infinity, that he can't write it into a book. He can't put it into form. He just gave it to Moses at Sinai. He said to Moses, here, it's for the Jews, because we know the Jews are connected to Hashem. So the Rebbe, this will be an example of that. The Rabba of the Lulav is in the book. Because as we said, it represents a simple faith. It represents a reflection of Hashem's purity. But the way that purity is reflected in the finite forms. And that's why it stands together with the other three. And they represent finite forms of expression of the neshama, of divine connection. Whereas the Arava of Hoshana Rabba represents the infinite purity of the soul as reflected from the infinite purity of Hashem. And therefore it couldn't be written in a book. There's no way to write it down. There's no way to spell it out. Hashem said to Moshe, here, just tell them. I can't write it. I can't print it. It's not printable. It's not shapeable. It's purity. It's the real pure will of Hashem remained, manifest. And once you come to this point, says the Rebbe, that nowadays, the Arava that we take on Hoshana Rabba, this thing that was conveyed to Moshe orally at Sinai, this was the Arava in the temple days, which that too was not expressed in the Torah itself, because it's beyond expression in any form as explained. However, nowadays, says the Rebbe, in a sense it goes a step lower, but really it's also a step higher. And here the Rebbe revisits a concept The Rabbi brings in all the Sichas and brings it in the footnotes. And that is that sometimes, the Rebbe says that ultimately, the Arava nowadays is just a custom. The language is minig neviim. It's a custom that we learned from the prophets. They did it, we do it. The whole thing of the Arava and the Hoshana Rabba and the banging 5 times, and we say especially Yehiratan, it's a custom. There's no way close to a biblical law. It's a custom. It's not even a rabbinic law. Says the Rebbe, in a sense, it's the greatest. In a sense, it's the greatest. By Hasidim, we know that all the customs are rooted very, very deeply. The previous Rebbe once said that the Hasidic customs, Moshe Rabbeinu heard from the Malachim, from the angels on their way down from the mountain. Says the Rebbe, the explanation is this. Remember, the Arava represents the simple connection, the purity of Hashem's essence. The Arava and the Lulav is written in the Torah, because it is the simple purity, but it's expressed through letters, through some form. The Arava of the Arava that was around the altar, that's not in the Lulav, that represents the pure simplicity, and therefore it was given to Moshe orally. But you want to know what's even greater than that? The Arava of nowadays, which represents a level in Hashem's essence where it's not communicable. He can't give it to Moshe to tell us. That's a place where a Yid is one with Hashem. The language is Yisrael Kadmu. The Jewish people precede Torah. They're rooted in Hashem's essence, and therefore there's no one to tell and there's nothing to tell. Hashem communicates. It's almost he's communicating to the Yid because the Yid is part of Hashem. How do we know it? We learned it from the prophets. We don't need to be given an instruction. And that's why in Hasidic life, those things that are a minhag, that are a custom, often take on greater import and greater emphasis than even a mitzvah, because a mitzvah means Hashem and you are separate, distinct beings, and he's commanding you. A custom means, I know what Hashem wants, I'm going to do this for him. There isn't a connection of one to another. The two are really one and the same. And therefore, the minhag neviim, the custom that we got from the prophets, they somehow knew, because they're prophets. They're tuned into the place where a Yid is rooted within Hashem. And now we just copy them. There is no such instruction. It's not in the book, and it's not even oral. It's just what he wants. How do we know? Because we're a part of him. We're connected to the prophets. And therefore, the connection represents an even greater connection to the pure simplicity of Hashem's infinity, where it's not even communicated, it just is. So in plain English, the takeaway from the Sicha would be that Hoshana Rabba, especially nowadays when it's a custom, and the Rebbe goes and explains in the footnotes and in the actual Sicha that this is linked to the fact that the joy of Simchas Torah is greater than the joy of Sukkot. The joy of Sukkot is a mitzvah from the Torah, like every holiday. Then we have the joy of the drawing of the water. See, there's a parallel of 3 levels. We have biblical, we have things that are given to Moshe orally at Sinai, and then we have those that are just custom. And the Rebbe is going to explain that really each one is higher than the other. So we have this in joy, and we have this in the Arava. We have this in the joy. We have the biblical commandment to observe the joy of the holiday, which is represented by the libations of the wine. Then we have the libations of the water, which is oral to Moshe at Sinai, and that represents an even greater level of joy. As we know, whoever didn't see the joy of the water never saw the joy, etc., etc. Why? It's not in the Torah. Of course, that's why it's a greater joy. It's beyond Torah. It's Hashem's infinity manifest directly to Moshe. And what's the greatest joy that Jews experience? Shmini Atzeres Simchas Torah with the Hakafis, which is really a custom. So why are you doing it? There isn't a why, there isn't an instruction. It's communicated because of the fact that the Yid is connected with Hashem. He doesn't need to be told. He can't be told. It's not something, please do this or that. This is what I want. This is my essential desire. And when a Yid does that, they connect to that level where a Yid and Hashem are absolutely one. And therefore, it's a custom. It's the greatest connection. So you have the 3 levels in the joy. The biblical, the drawing of the wine, and the holiday joy. The communicated to Moshe at Sinai, which is the drawing of the water, which is even greater, and the custom of dancing on Simchas Torah and Shmini Atzeres, which is only a custom, which is even greater. Parallel that to the Arava. The Arava of the Lulav, that's biblical. It's of course Hashem's will, as expressed through the words of the Torah, the forms of the Torah. It's infinity expressed in form. But then you have the Arava which was in the temple as distinct from the lulav, which is halacha l'Moshe Misinai, orally given to Moshe. It can't be in the book. It's the purity of Hashem's will beyond expression in the forms of words and letters. It's not in the book. It's not in the book. It's just given. Fantastic. But then we have even greater the Rabba that we, you and I do today, which is only a custom of the prophets. Only. This is the greatest infinity. It wasn't even communicated. It doesn't say it in the book. It wasn't communicated. It's not communicable. How do we know? Because we follow the Rebbe, we follow the prophets, we follow those who live the example that a neshama is one with Hashem, and they know what he wants, because we're part of him. There's no communication here, and that's beyond everything. In a sense, it's an expression of the essence, says the Rebbe. That's why you'll notice in the footnote, that's why you'll notice that Hoshana Rabba butts up to Shmini Atzeres Simchas Torah. It's not random. Shmini Atzeres Simchas Torah is this extraordinary joy, beyond any limitation. And why? Because that's the moment when a Yid realizes that he's one with Hashem and he dances with the Torah. He doesn't have to open the Torah. He doesn't have to study the Torah. It's not a level of connection to Torah that is appreciated by intellectual understanding or otherwise. It's just the Torah and him are one with Hashem. And it's a great equalizer. The greatest scholar and the simple Jew are dancing, because that's Shmini Atzeres Simchas Torah, as we just explained. It's the essence of the essence. The language is Yisrael Kadmu, the Jew precedes Torah. The Jew is one with Hashem, just like the Torah is. And that's why, what do you do the day before? How do you manifest that in the Arava? You take the Arava as distinct from the Lulav, and even as, in a sense, greater than the Arava of the temple, which at least has a conveyance. By Moshe at Sinai, this is not conveyed. It's just what the prophets do, so we do it too. It's what Hashem wants, what Hashem express Hashem's essence, and his will is expressed in the custom. So says the Rebbe, this brings us back to the beginning of the Sicha. While the sages insisted Hoshana Rabbah shouldn't fall on Shabbos, and they wired up the calendar as such. And you think, like, what's the big deal? Rosh Hashanah can be Shabbos, and we won't blow the shofar. The first day Sukkot can be Shabbos, and we won't shake the lulav. That's the reality. But when it comes to Hoshana Rabbah, we can't miss it. Hoshana Rabbah represents the essence, and the essence represents a constant. There's not a lot of words in the Rebbe explaining that, but just the fact that the essence represents a constant. It's perfect infinity, and therefore it can't be missed. It's impossible that it should be missed. And therefore Hoshana Rabbah and its customs, and nowadays become the greatest of the great.